Welcome back to episode 6 of RMV.
Hey guys, I hope you're all doing great and thanks for tuning in for today's episode.
Today is yet another special episode for us because we have Taylor Fraser from Colorado, Denver.
Taylor is the director of the Foreward Podcast and a production manager. Her work has appeared in worldwide on Forbes, NBC, the Discovery Channel, and other broadcasting networks. She also played a significant role in the production of her trailers of major films, including Black Panther, Wonder Woman, Jungle Book, and many more.
When Taylor was just 15, she encountered a school shooting. Her podcast, the Foreward Podcast, talks about just that, which is about a family story after the tragedy of a school shooting. Check it out. You don't want to miss it.
Yeah, so we wanted to start off by asking about your journey. So what or who inspired you to become a director?
So when I went to college, I had no intention of becoming a director, nor did I know anything about film at all. I was actually studying journalism, and then they closed down the journalism school, and I was like, what do I do? So I took a bunch of random classes, and one of them was film, and I fell in love with it, and I was like, this is it. And I changed my degree the next day. We had watched a foreign film, a French film called Blue, and I'd never seen a foreign film because I grew up in this like little town in the middle of nowhere. And so I saw the film and I was like, this is so cool. And I decided, like, I don't care if I have to live in a cardboard box for the rest of my life. Like, I'm going to be an artist. But actually it's gone well. But that was what initially triggered my interest.
So as a director, you've probably faced so many different types of obstacles. So what type of obstacles have you faced through your journey?
Oh man. Well, film is like just a weird industry in general. Like no matter who you are, it's really, really competitive. There's no like really obvious way of like getting into the industry. But it's especially difficult if you're a young woman because it's one of those things that like, so I have one degree in film and one in communications, and communications was like 90% women and film was like 90% men. And the same is true in the industry. So you'll be on set and they'll be like one woman and everybody else is a man. And so it can be, intimidating to figure out like, okay, where is my place in this world? And that can be challenging, and it just takes a lot of determination. It's one of those fields that a lot of people who work in film have like an in, like their parent worked in film or something, but I didn't. So if you're in that boat, then you just have to be really creative and go, okay, how do I weasel my way into interesting opportunities? You have to be willing to work really hard and for not a lot of money for a certain amount of years in order to like get your foot in the door. You know what I mean? What do the two of you want to study?
Well, I have no idea, and like it's really stressing me out because I'm going to senior year next year. We both are, so I'm right now I'm choosing between like science and medicine and like
Cool.
computer programming. So I'm going to experiment more in the summer to see.
Very exciting. That'll be another one of those fields that you'll be like the only woman in some of your classes, and that'll feel weird.
Yeah, exactly. My dad was saying the same thing. Like in the computer science field, there's not that many women. So like he's like, it's a we need more women in that field. So I think it's also a good opportunity if you want to go. And I'm like,
absolutely.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And the other thing is like you don't have to know what you want to do when you start college. Like I think that's a really like toxic rumor because nobody really knows. Like no one knows at 18 what they want to do for the rest of their life. I mean, I'm 30 and a lot of my friends don't know what they want to do yet. So it's like, it just takes time. What about you? What do you want to study?
Yeah, so I wanted to study computer science. Like my dad's an engineer too, so he was also saying the same thing. Like, there should be women in the, science field, like in
absolutely
programming. So my dad was saying how like, we should have that diversity is really important, and a lot of companies, they're looking for such diversity because with diversity we have like so many different minds. Instead of being like specific to one ethnicity or group, it's not going to be it's not going to be successful. So yeah, for me,
absolutely, I totally agree with you. And I think the same is true in the film industry. I mean, the film industry, like we get to dictate what stories are told, right? So if it's all like middle-aged white guys, then those are the stories we hear, and that's all. And that's sad because there's so many other interesting stories that we should be hearing, and you only get that with diverse perspectives. So I think that the same is true in any industry. That's cool.
Yeah.
That's really great that you guys are both going to study in that world.
Yeah, I'm still looking to it. Like, yeah, as you said, like, I guess the first year of college you can still experiment, but I'm getting like so stressed. I have no idea what I want to do. So many of my friends already chose their paths. I'm like, and I'm still here, like,
Oh, they're going to change their minds. They don't know it
yeah.
yet, but they will change their minds. And that's okay. I mean, I went into college. You can declare as many majors as you want. So I just declared a double major in like 2 different things. And I was like, maybe. And then you can get into those classes. So it behooves you to like pick something that's interesting, but it's literally like you just sign a paper to change it. So, don't stress about that. And your core
Okay.
classes are all the same anyway. So it doesn't
Yeah.
really matter what your degree is. They're going to make you take all the basics anyway.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah, so I heard you worked in the Oceanic Preservation Society, and I think it was in the logistics department. So
Yeah, I worked as a producer, which you're right, that is logistics. So you're kind of the person who's like herding the cats and figuring out like, okay, so like 15 filmmakers who are vegans want to go to a cannibal island in Sri Lanka. How do we make that happen? So my job is like, we get them visas, we get them embargoes, like where are they going to eat dinner? How are we going to get their equipment on a boat? And how are we going to waterproof it? Who are they going to interview? What are we going to ask them? What shirt is that person going to wear? Like that's what
Yeah.
it was. And yeah, so my career started there, and they made the movie called The Cove. I don't know if you ever saw that. It's about the dolphin slaughter in Taiji, Japan. So that's a heavy, pretty depressing documentary. And so they were kind of ending that as I started. And we were working on a film called Racing Extinction. And it was about like climate change and why are so many animals going extinct. So that was cool because we got to go talk to some of the best climate scientists in the whole world. And that was amazing. And then my career kind of took me in other directions, but I still got to work on their most recent project called The Game Changers, which is about vegan athletes. So that was super interesting too. That was not something I knew anything about. So that was fun to jump into that.
Yeah, that's very interesting how you got to work with all, people around the world too. I think that's very cool.
Yeah.
And like, yeah, I guess, yeah, communication is such a huge part of your job too, because you have to like talk to so many people. I think that's very important too.
Yeah, if you're the kind of person who likes to coordinate stuff and like work with challenging personalities, then that's the job for you. But if you if you don't like that, maybe pick a different, like when you're in film school, there's all these different things they have you study. And so you kind of, most people pick one of like, I want to be a director or a producer or an editor or whatever. But if you live in Colorado, there's not a lot of film industry here. So you're kind of expected to be able to do all of it as kind of a one-man band. So you learn like a little bit of everything. And throughout my career, I've gotten to do a little bit of everything, which has been really cool.
Yeah, that's very cool.
yeah, go ahead. No, I was gonna ask. So, do you make trailers for like films like Beauty and the Beast, things like that?
Yeah, when I was living in Los Angeles, I worked for a movie trailer house. And in Los Angeles, it's really different than Colorado because you do have to specialize. So everybody at my company pretty much was an editor. And there were like hundreds of us, big companies. So I did get to work on those projects. Everybody plays a different role. Generally, I was working in like kind of the more technical pieces of the process, but sometimes we would have a network send something in. Like I got to edit all of the Fargo season 3 because it would come in as just like a million clips and they were completely disorganized. You can't make a trailer when there is no show. So like I got to do the rough draft edit of the whole season so that my boss could take it and make it into something like really cool. So, I'd get to take a first whack at it and be like, what do you think of this? And then someone who has 20 years of experience makes it even cooler. And so it was really neat and then there's somebody else's job as a kind of producer role who's coordinating between like our company and like Disney, let's say, and figuring out, well, what is it that they want and how do we communicate that in what we're making? So yeah, I did get to work on trailers and that was really fun because working on documentaries, often you have like a bunch of like kind of weird shots that are like, I guess this will work, because a lot of the time you're like working on the run and so you just get what you get. And when you're working on a trailer for something like Beauty and the Beast, you have like 2 hours of beautiful content, and then you narrow it down to like a minute. So you pick the most beautiful of the most beautiful. And so, you know, it ends up being like, it's a pretty cool job.
Yeah, it is. It's a cool job, and also like the trailer is what brings like gets everyone's attention. So like the trailer has to be good, so people want to watch the movie.
Yeah.
Totally, definitely. Yeah, it's like its own like little mini movie. And I don't know about you guys, but whenever I go to a movie theater, I love watching the trailers. It's one of my favorite parts.
Yeah, I love watching all the different trailers too.
Yeah, it's weird because like it's a pretty creative process. So depending on what choices the editors are making, maybe the trailer is exactly like the movie and you really know what you're getting into, or maybe they make it something totally different. So there was a movie with Jennifer Lawrence a few years ago called Passengers, and it was like, I'm trying to remember, in real life, I think it was kind of like a sci-fi thriller, like kind of scary, but the trailer made it look like, oh, this lovely chick flick. It's so cute. And then you watch it and you're like, ah. So it's it's like you can also be like really manipulative. Like film is a weird medium that you can, I don't know, I think people think of it as, even documentary people think of it as like, oh, this is objective. And it's like, no, it's not. Because if I choose to put you in a frame where it's real tight or like really far away, or like I change how powerful you look, if I choose to edit in the question where you said something really smart, or I pick the moment where you said something weird and I make you look dumb, like, you know, like you have a lot of power as a filmmaker. Like some people use it responsibly and some people don't, and sometimes they just use it for advertising purposes to make good money.
Yeah, that's very interesting. That's so true, because sometimes the trailer will give off the wrong idea. Like it's like maybe it's like a whole like thriller thing, but you go to the movies, it's actually a whole comedy thing, and we're like, what is this?
Yeah. Exactly. And it depends on what the studio thinks will make money.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's also
that.
Yeah, it's also a lot of work to like pick the good parts, the best parts for people to get their attention to.
Totally. And that's part of the trailer making process. Like there's like a team of people, and that is their job, is to go through a movie and pick every moment where someone goes, ah, oh, wow. Like, and then you put them all in a row. And then there's another section that says, my name is so-and-so, or like, hi, I'm la la la. And then those all go in a row. And so there's this very formulaic way of like, these are the pieces we need. And then you put them in an order that makes them cool. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've always wondered, like how is the trailer making process like they are, because I know it does take a really long time. And for me too, when I like book the tickets for a movie, I always watch the trailer. My parents always, and sometimes they don't watch it. They're like, I don't want to know anything, I don't want to know whatever happens
The
in
spoilers.
the movie. Why are you watching the trailer? I'm like, I need to watch the trailer to see what is about.
Yeah, and are you interested or not?
Exactly.
Is it something you want to invest 2 hours of your time in? Or I don't know, I watch series a lot on Netflix, and that's like you're investing like 15 hours of your life. So, you want to know what you're getting into.
So have you ever encountered with any celebrities while making trailers or in your job?
The coolest time, and it's so weird because this was not even in Hollywood, so this was super random, but I was on a job. I was working for a record label, and we were recording this musician. His name is David Darling, and he's like one of the best cellists in the world, so that's his gig. So we were up there doing that with him, and we went to go get Italian food, and I was like just like sitting in like the waiting area, and Meryl Streep just like sits down next to me, and I'm like, oh my God. I thought I was gonna pee in my pants, and I didn't say anything to her because I was like, I don't want to be that person who's like annoying, but she's like known as the best actress like in all of history, and I'm like, why are you sitting here in Connecticut eating Italian food? Like, that is just so cool.
Wow, that must have been amazing.
that was probably the most exciting one.
Can't imagine like a celebrity just sits right next to you.
Yeah, it was weird. It was super weird. But even when you live in Hollywood, you just see people like in their cars and stuff when you're
That's
like
true.
Leonardo DiCaprio lived like next door to where I lived. I never saw him, but he lived, but I could see his house. It was right there. Oh, there was another funny time. I was walking, there's like a little grocery store in the Hollywood Hills, and then my house was kind of like up the hill a little. And most people just drive everywhere in LA. They never walk, but I was like, it's not that far. I'm going to walk. So I'm holding like a million grocery bags and I'm walking up the path. And one of the Kardashians, the younger one, Chloe, is that her name?
It's Chloe. Yeah.
Chloe. Okay,
I think
Chloe.
so.
She like physically like bumped into me with all of my groceries, and then she just looked at me like, "Don't you know who I am?" And I'm like,
"Oh my God,
get out of the way!" Like, I'm trying to walk here. So I don't know.
Wow.
It's weird. Like, once you start seeing people just like, oh look, there's so and so in the grocery store. Like, it's like you start to realize like they're just people like we are, and some of them are cool and some of them are jerks, and like.
Yeah.
The Elon Musk ones. I forgot about that. That was kind of cool.
Oh my God.
At the premiere of the film I'd worked on, Racing Extinction. And so it was him, and then next to him was Leilani Munter, who's a famous race car driver. And I was just like, well, how is this my life? This is so weird. Like, it's just like right there. Anyway.
Yeah, that's so cool. Yeah, and yeah, as you said, like celebrities are also just humans too. Like, yeah. So yeah, I think it's very important for people to realize that too.
Yeah, I think that's definitely true. My roommate, when I was living in Los Angeles, is a very famous piano player, and we had worked together previously. I've had so many like weird adventures, but I lived in Montana for a while. I was working at an art center there, and we became friends there. And so when we were roommates, it was like, people were so weird around him because they're like, oh, it's famous. And it's like, yeah, but he's also like my friend, and like we watch movies every night, like have a beer. Like, I don't know. It's like he's just a guy.
Yeah.
But yeah, people put other people on a pedestal so high that I don't know. It's a weird thing we do in our culture for sure.
Yeah, for sure. You're treated differently, when you're a celebrity, and that can be a good thing and also a bad thing at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. I agree.
Yeah, and also I heard like your podcast, the Foreward Podcast. So I was reading it. I was reading the description on your website, and I saw that there was 70 actors on the.
Yeah, that was really crazy because I'd never written a script before. I'd worked in this world for a long time, but I'd never written a script. And as I'm writing the script, it's like, so there's like 4 main characters in my story. And if you give each of them one friend, then all of a sudden now you already have 8 characters. And those are just like the main characters. And so it just keeps like growing and growing and growing. And you keep like consolidating characters to be like, well, maybe that person can also be that person, and we can just make them one. But still, it does end up growing and becoming this huge thing. And I recorded during COVID. So that's like not ideal to try and record 70 actors during quarantine. So I set up like a recording studio space for them. And so when they would arrive here, we would go rehearse in the backyard, 6 feet away from each other outside. And then we'd bring them inside, and they had their own like little room. And so I was on a microphone and they were on a microphone, and we could hear each other, but we couldn't see each other. And they would read the lines with me. So even let's say it's supposed to be a husband and a wife, and I'm recording with the wife. Well, then she has to pretend I'm her husband, which is like not super realistic, but we would record our lines together. So she'd be like, well, Stuart, blah, 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 blah. And I'd be like, yes, my wife, ha, ha, ha. It was weird, but it actually worked, because in the end, it felt like all the actors, it felt like they were talking to somebody. They were just talking to the wrong person. So then I would cut out myself and replace myself with the right actor, because they all recorded one at a time, not with each other. And so it was like a gigantic puzzle of like hundreds of thousands probably of clips throughout.
Wow. Yeah, that must have taken so much work. Like, yeah, because oh my God, yeah, especially during COVID, it must have been so hard, and like putting all the pieces together. Yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, I listened to this.
So much easier for like the 3 of us to record together in the same room, and then we can like have chemistry and like bounce off of each other. But really, I'd be recording with each of you separately, and then we'd put it together at the last minute.
Yeah, it must have been.
Wow.
Yeah, it must have been really hard because I didn't know it was during COVID. I thought maybe it's like pre-record, pre-COVID times. Because like when I listened to it, it seemed so realistic, and my imagination was just like just running. So
Okay, let me ask you, when you listen, do you like picture the characters in your head? Do you like picture the scenery and
I
picture
picture the scenery.
Yeah, I picture them
Okay.
like two people like talking at like
I think
like if there's two
too.
people talking, I picture them.
I read an article the other day that said that like 50% of people or something, they don't do that when they like read books. They don't like picture the characters, and I totally do.
That's
So
what
I
I
was,
do.
how else would you read a book with characters and not like picture them and like give them like character
Yeah.
traits? But I think that's kind of the cool thing about the podcast, because it's different than your guys' podcast. For your audience who hasn't heard it before, it's an audio drama, which is basically like watching a TV show without being able to see the screen. So you hear all the characters talking to each other. They're in different settings. You know, you've heard it, so you know. But yeah, so because of that, I find myself picturing like, okay, this is what I think the building looks like, and this is what this classroom looks like, and this is what, you know, because they're always moving from place to place. And it's funny because I just heard from a network that wants to see a pitch deck, which is like a proposal for season 2. And so I had to go find like pictures of the characters, and it was so weird to like go on the internet and be like, what does the fictionalized version of Stuart look like?
Yeah.
I don't know. And probably everyone pictures him differently because, you know,
Yeah,
he's
yeah.
a fictionalized person and he's based on a real person, but you know, an actor's gonna play him. So like, what does the actor look like who plays him? I don't know.
Yeah, that's also really cool. Like how everyone can picture differently how they listen to it, and they have their own different imaginations, and they can picture the story differently, and I think that's really cool.
I think so too. I think it's kind of a cool, like, I don't think we often get to use that part of our brain, you know, in 2021. It's just not a thing we get to do very often, especially like when you're like your age or my age, that at some point, like, it's kind of expected that you don't like play anymore and like be silly. And I like the idea that Forward is this thing where you have to use your imagination. You have to tap into that part of your brain where you're like creating and imagining. And I don't know, I think that's kind of cool.
But did you have so did you want to make it a TV show? Because when I listened to it, like my friends and I were calling, and she listened to it too. She works on our team. She's the artist of our podcast. She makes
Cool.
the background and everything, and she actually helped with the script as well. And she was telling me like, oh, ask Taylor if she why did you choose to make a podcast rather than a TV show?
I want it to be a TV show. So that is the long-term plan. So I'm writing like a revised script that will be proposed to like a Netflix eventually. So, but so after having lived in Los Angeles, like literally everyone has a script. Like everyone. You get in your Uber and they have a script for you. Like everyone has a script. And so the people who are in charge don't have time to read a million scripts. So I thought, what if I could create this on my own? Which I had like the budget and the time to do independently. And then when people are driving on their very long commutes, because that is the case in LA, they can listen to it in their headphones. People listen to podcasts on their drives in LA. So that was my alternative to a script. And I thought that might be a better way to get it into the hands of the right person, with also hopes that if I prove that it has an audience, then like a big production network would be more likely to be like, oh yeah, okay, cool. Like there's already an audience who's interested in the subject matter. So that's, yeah, your friend is right on. I think that would be so cool. And that's kind of why it's already written like a TV script or pretty close to it. So yeah, so I'm working the script now for what it would be if it was a television series, which is a little bit of a prequel to season 1. It has part of season 1 in it. But anyway, yeah, it's exciting.
Yeah, that's very interesting. Yeah, if it turns to a TV show, I definitely watch it because it already interests me. It was like really intriguing to listen to the first couple episodes.
No, thank you.
Yeah. So speaking about Foreward Podcast, do you want to explain more about the podcast? Like, what's it about? Why did you start it? What the message to your listeners?
Totally. So I had been wanting to create a podcast for many years and never had really done it for a few reasons, including the fact that I was like nervous because the story is a very vulnerable story. And it tells the true story, based on the true story of what happened when I was 15 years old and there was a shooting at my high school, which, you know, unfortunately has become such a reoccurring problem. It's like kind of part of all of our lives. Like, I don't know if you guys have drills at your school, but like I think most schools in the United States, like it's kind of part of the deal, you know? So anyway, this happened to me when I was 15. And so the story that I wrote is about my own reaction to it, and then my immediate family, the ways in which we healed or sometimes didn't, because we didn't have great coping skills. I mean, no one knows how to deal when something that horrible happens. And so that was basically what Foreword was is about, is the aftermath, because the reporters go away after it happens and everyone's like, that's sad, and then they move on. But really, in my opinion, the aftermath is just as interesting because it deals with like people who are really struggling with their own mental health and don't know where to go and don't know what's normal and what's not normal. And so that's the idea.
Yeah, I remember for us, like in school, I think it was like 2 years back, but all of a sudden, I think we were in break. I'm not really sure, but we were in break, and all of a sudden, like there was this, I think it was like the office. The people just spoke through like, "Please go to your classes," and then we were under lockdown. Like they just shut the curtains, and we
oh my God.
we hid in the classroom, and I was like, oh my God, this is so scary. And everyone was like texting, and the thing is, you're not supposed to text because you can cause panic, and maybe that's the reason, the whole point, right? You don't want to text anyone. And so we were kind
of
at
the same time, like you want your family to know like what's going on and that you're like, okay, that's interesting. I didn't know that was a rule that you're not allowed to text.
Yeah. So but still a lot of people were texting, no matter what. But it was, so apparently like there was someone armed outside, and I don't know, someone like stole something and they were running, and so the school authorities were like, okay, you know what, everyone has to go under lockdown. And I think it was like for an hour we were like that. And then after
that must have been terrifying because like
was,
you don't know what's going on.
exactly.
And like you don't know if your life is in danger or not.
Yeah, I was having like bad thoughts in my head. I'm like, oh my God, what's like, does that person have a gun? What if the person's like right there, by the door? And so it was really scary for me to like handle mentally. So Taylor, you were like a survivor of a shooting that happened in 2006, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so how did it affect you like mentally and physically? And can you tell us a little bit more about like the shooter also?
Yeah. So just the basics of what happened. And if you choose to listen to the podcast, then you'll hear like the whole story, like every detail. And it is very dark, but essentially what happened is there was a man who had very severe mental illness, and he had bipolar 1 and was hallucinating. And as far as any of us know, there was no real connection to my high school. It was just kind of random, but he was homeless. He was living out of his Jeep. And one day he wandered into our school, and he went into a classroom that was down the hall from where I was. So he was kind of at this end, and then I was at this end. And exactly as you described, and that's the thing, you don't know if it's real or not. The announcement comes over the intercom. They say, this is a code white situation. We need everyone to lock down. And as a student in 2006, I didn't know what that meant because we didn't do drills at that time. Columbine had happened in 1999, but there was like a big gap between the two, and schools just hadn't really incorporated that into their protocol. So when it happened, we were all like, is this real? And it's scary because you don't know if it's real. But next thing you know, we're hearing gunshots, and we were teenagers, and we were scared. And so we were kind of like joking of like, oh no, that was just a door slamming, or that wasn't real. This couldn't possibly be real, because your brain can't even wrap around the reality of like, oh my God, this is actually happening. And in the podcast, I try and tell the perspective of like, people had very different reactions from people who were being like jokey and like not accepting it at all to people who were in hysterics, which, you know, makes sense. Different people have different reactions to scary stuff. But anyway, we were under lockdown for a long time, very similar to what you described. And then when we were finally evacuated, we learned that there had been a classroom that was taken hostage. They kicked out all the boys and the teacher, and then they kicked out all the girls who were not blonde. And then there were 6 girls left. And then one by one, the hostage negotiator was able to get most of them out. One girl was killed, and when she died, he shot himself. And so, yeah, it was really, really bad. And so part of the story I'm trying to tell is that even if you weren't in that room specifically, oh God, it still impacted you a lot. If you were a sibling of somebody who was in the building, if you were the parent of somebody in the building, if you were their coach, if you were their boss, like it affected everyone. It even within like a few degrees of separation, and no one talks about that part. So you had asked me like what were the repercussions for me, and it's changed a lot throughout the years. But I believe that pretty much everybody in the community had PTSD. And with PTSD, like different people have different symptoms, but for me, I was having like really bad nightmares, like really, 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 really bad. And because I was young and immature, I was like, if I drink enough caffeine, I can just not sleep. Not a good idea, but that's what I thought as a 15-year-old. So like you come up with like not healthy ways to deal with these very serious things that are going on in your brain. It caused a lot of like kind of panic attack stuff. And that's a really scary feeling because you don't know like what's happening or like how to make it stop. And like as an adult, I have learned how to make it stop. But like I didn't know that when I was 15. There were a lot of things that like scared me that weren't very logical. Like I'd hear like a firework and like jump out of my skin, you know, or like an intercom would ding and I like thought that like, oh, it's happening again. Like, you know, when you hear people describe like flashbacks, it's kind of like that kind of thing where a person with PTSD, it's like your brain thinks that you're back there, like for real, even though you're not. Like the man who committed the crime at my high school is a homeless man. So within the next like few years after the shooting, sometimes I would see a homeless man and have this like horrible like knee-jerk reaction that I knew was like wrong and politically incorrect and inaccurate, but I would think like that man has a gun, he's going to kill me. And I like really believed that in my head, even though that is not logical. And as you get older, and you know, for people who choose to go to therapy, I decided to go to see a therapist, and that was really helpful because she could help me understand like, okay, some of the stuff like it's going to fade over time, or you can learn strategies so that it affects you less over time. And that has been true. Like in more recent years, like the firework thing doesn't bother me anymore. And it was like one day I went to a fireworks show and it was great. And I went home and I would turn on the news and they were like, yeah, some veterans don't like fireworks. And I was like, I wonder why, like, why does that? And then I realized like, oh, you've been afraid of fireworks for like 10 years. And for some reason it was just gone. And I don't know what that was, if it was therapy or if it was time or I don't know. But yeah, there's just like a lot of stuff that gets a little wonky in your brain after you go through anything that's horribly traumatic, like not even just a shooting, but I feel like most people in their lifetimes go through something that's really awful. And when that happens, you know, it takes a long time to get back to a place where you feel normal, if ever. And yeah, so that's part of what the story of Foreward is about, is that you don't just like snap back. Like after something really bad happens to you, you're a changed person, and the way that your brain works might be a little bit different.
So make sure to check it out. Foreward Podcast, link in the description.
Awesome. Yeah, I hope people will.
Yeah, it's really crazy how like in this time, you know, it's shootings or, you know, it's like a common thing now. It's like part of our lives, you know. Yeah, our schools definitely have, you know, these drills every once now that we, practice lockdown drills and like have these special rules. Like, the kids get assigned, like we have like special jobs, like, a group of kids will get the board and like put it behind the door. A group of kids will, put the chairs behind the door, and we have all these procedures and stuff.
What is your opinion on that? Because it has become fairly controversial that some people are like, this is good, it's important, we need to prepare people. And then some people are like, well, that's freaking dramatic. And it probably, I have not had the experience of doing drills, but it seems like it would be pretty unsettling.
Yeah, it definitely is, kind of scary to think about, like, wow, we have like to think about like if we have to do this. But I think it is important to me because like you have no idea when it's going to happen. You have no idea. You just come to school one day, you'll think it's a normal day, and suddenly something happens, and it might be crazy. But like if you have a plan, I think it's more you get more prepared. You'll be like, oh, okay, so like I know what to do. So I think it is an important thing to do.
And you make a good point. I mean, it is unfortunately a reality of living in the United States. And until something changes and it becomes not a reality, unfortunately, people do have to prepare for that possibility. So that it's interesting you bring it up that way.
Yeah, I was gonna say that I think it's important too to have certain drills because, like as Megha said, it's like a common thing now in the United States. It's been like happening like maybe once a month. I don't know. Like I've always seen in the news like about some shootings happening in Texas, and other states.
There's been
like you're having like a nice year, like really happy, and all of a sudden it's like, oh my God, there's a active shooter. Just someone saw someone, and then it's like, or you heard gunshots. Like I can't, life is unpredictable. So I think it's important that you should do those drills, even though it may, like you said, Taylor, like dramatic, and like really like, oh my God, like why would you do that such a thing, right? And so I think it's important because like it makes you prepared, right, for the future, and like even if it does really happen, like that situation does happen, you know what to do then. It's kind of like an earthquake thing. Yeah.
That's so interesting that you guys think of it that way. I mean, and I think it's just like a sign of the times. I mean, you're exactly right on. I mean, there's been 304 fatal school shootings since Columbine. So, and that's just like from an article that was published like a year ago or something. And since then, there's been so many more. And it's not just in schools, it's at festivals, it's in churches, it's in movie theaters. It's like, so I think you're probably right. It probably is something like once a month if you really like go like where are all of the shootings happening. And it's almost become like not shocking anymore when you see it on the news, which is so disturbing. And that's part of why I've made Forward as well, because it's like it should be disturbing. Like it's not normal. It's not normal that you guys should have to experience that in your high schools. And pre-Columbine, no one had to do lockdown drills. And in other countries, people don't have to do lockdown drills. Like I did an interview like this recently with this gal from Luxembourg, and she was like so confused. She's like, can you explain to me like, and wait, why do you have school shooting drills? Like, why is that? And it like is hard to explain to someone who lives in a country where this does not happen. And I don't know, it's so weird that it is unfortunately like a part of our reality.
Yeah, it could happen anywhere. It's not just schools. Like I think not last year, the year before that, my family was actually planning to go to the Gilroy Gardens garlic festival. If you guys ever heard of it?
Yeah, I heard about that.
Gonna go, but like the week before we had some party or something, so we decided like we shouldn't go. We should go to the party instead. And then, on the day we found out like there was a shooting, and my mom and me were like shocked. We're like, we were supposed to go there, and we were like, oh my God, this is so scary because it can happen anywhere at any time.
Totally. Like, thank goodness you had a change of plans, but like that is terrifying, like it's weird that we've just like gotten used to the fact that we have to like look for exits when we go into like buildings, or like I don't know, it's just so creepy to me. Like I have a friend who's a teacher, and she's like, yeah, the teachers keep litter boxes under their desk in case of a lockdown so that kids have somewhere to go to the bathroom if they're under lockdown for so many hours. And she's like, it's so practical. And I'm like, what? Like, that is insane. Like the fact that is a thing is so twisted, and we've just it's just like normalized. I think it's so bizarre.
I think a lot of like political candidates and like a lot of politicians too are also talking about like gun violence in general, like their opinions about it. And like my friends, after the election, they were all talking about. There were like a lot of stuff on Instagram, like posts on my feed. I was like swiping and reading some information about gun violence, like, oh, vote for this person because they will promote less guns or something like that. And so there's a lot of people. It's like, again, as like you said, Taylor, it's like really controversial topic to talk about. And like, yeah, like I feel like our president or like they should do something about it to like maybe like lessen the amount of guns, so
something.
that the shootings won't happen in the United States and we can safely go to school.
The thing is, like, I believe that there are solutions because this doesn't happen in other countries. It makes me think there has got to be a way to change this, because this is like a uniquely American problem, but it's a complicated thing because in our culture in the United States, it is politicized. It doesn't really have to be, but it is. And in creating Forward, it's been really interesting because I've been having conversations with people who are very conservative and people who are very liberal and asking them, like, what do you think we should do? Because at the end of the day, pretty much everyone agrees they don't want their kid to be killed in a school shooting. Like, that part, not controversial. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants to be afraid to go to church or to go to a garlic festival. It, like, no one wants that. And like, I get that we live in a country where like gun rights are important to people, but I don't think that most responsible gun owners, I don't think they want guns to be in the hands of people who have severe mental illness and very violent tendencies, and if we could change that piece, then maybe things could change.
Yeah.
But I do think that it requires people who have different political beliefs to find a compromise. And instead it's so polarizing that it's either like no one can own a gun or like everyone should own a gun. And it's like, no, but I think there's an in-between.
Yeah, this topic, it's very controversial. Everyone has their own different opinions that it's like so hard to come up with
talk about a solution.
One solution, because and it's such a dangerous thing. Like I'm against the gun use. I think it there should be laws, more stricter laws. And so I think it's like, as you were mentioning in your experience, like people, you don't have people around you like who just heard the gunshot can suffer from PTSD. And I think it's very important for other people to realize that this is very important. And as you said, like reporters don't really talk about that as much. So I think it's really important how you in your podcast you discuss it.
Yeah, and hopefully, like, I think we just need to bring this to people's attention, because it's not just like the kids who were in the room or the kids who witnessed the shooter. It's like a whole community. And like, you think about like what just recently happened at the Capitol, like probably all of those people have PTSD in all likelihood. And those are the people who are like the leaders in the United States and like making our laws. And they're probably not sleeping at night because they are probably having horrible nightmares and panic attacks and whatever. And it's like, like these are like groups of like thousands and thousands of people. If you take, like you just said, there's been one a month, let's say, and then there's like at least 1,000 people affected every time. So that it's like a huge percentage of the United States has been affected in some way by gun violence. And like that seems really troubling that there are a lot of people walking around with that specific trauma when perhaps there's a way to avoid it or change it.
Yeah, like I believe too, like both of you guys said that, there should be laws, like you need a license to own a gun. And like you said, Taylor, like you should own a gun, you shouldn't maybe own a gun if you have like disorders or PTSD, like you said, right? So
yeah. Well, like the guy who did what he did at my school had a criminal record and still had like 10 guns. And I'm like, why did he not have to have a background check? And it's confusing because like apparently his nephew also bought a couple guns for him at the last minute too. So like it was like a younger person bought them for him because maybe then it wasn't legal or something. But still, like, it doesn't make sense he had any guns at all in the first place if he had a criminal record and had bipolar 1. Like, I don't know. It just is odd.
Yeah, I was wondering, like, how did your school recover? Like, I imagine it took, like, such a long, it takes time, So, like, what did you guys do, like, after this incident?
It was really weird. I think maybe it was like just a different time, and I grew up in a very conservative small town. And in my little town, it was kind of understood of like, we're moving on, like get over it, move on, don't talk about it. And because of that, I think a lot of people were really suffering and nobody said anything. Like, I know I was suffering and I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be like the one weird person who was like messed up when everyone else is like fine. So I think like it was 15 years ago, right? But people have been contacting me because of Foreword and saying, oh my God, I felt the same way. And I had no idea anyone felt that way but me. And I guess that's part of why I think this is important, is that I want people to know that if they've gone through something really, really hard, whether or not it's a shooting, it is okay to seek help. And it's okay to feel like you're not quite okay. Because it would be weird if you just snap back to normal the next day. That's not how the brain works. So, but that's kind of how my town expected it to be. And so people were like silently trying to find ways to deal and coping in really dangerous ways, whether that was they were cutting themselves or they were drinking too much or they were doing drugs or they were having sex before they were really ready to, or whatever. People were taking really dangerous risk for people who are 15, 16, 17 years old. And yeah, I just feel like I've veered off there. I'm trying to remember what your original question. Oh, how the community healed. Yeah, I don't think we did. I think people either grew up and moved out and sought help and healed, or they like stuffed it away somewhere that they just didn't ever deal with it.
I also read that you went to the, like, after he killed himself, after the shooter killed himself, you went to his house, I think.
Yeah, so I read his suicide note, which is a weird thing to do, but I was trying to, it was important to me to understand like that this was a real person, because for me, like my whole life I've just been so angry at like, oh my God, what a messed up horrible person, and I can't forgive him and it's so bad. And when I wrote the script I realized like, no, he was a person who was suffering. Like that does not excuse what he did at all, but he had severe mental illness and he was homeless and he had no resources. He had nowhere to go. And I can't imagine how scary that would be, to go from having like a working mind that worked, correctly, and you're smart and whatever. And then all of a sudden you don't know what's real and what's not. It's like, oh my God. So anyway, it was important for me as I wrote the script that I wanted people to have empathy for this person. And in order for them to have empathy, then I needed to have some, and I didn't. So I really needed to come to terms with like understanding that he was a flawed person, just like we all are in ways. And yeah, there was an address in the suicide note of where he was staying, like right before he became homeless. And it's actually really close to my current house. So it was really weird and creepy to go. I like drove over there and like sat in the parking lot. And I think I did that with the expectation that I was going to like freak out and have a lot of emotions, and then that was going to be helpful for writing or something. But I didn't. And it was actually kind of a powerful moment because I finally realized that like this person doesn't control me anymore. Like for so many years, I let that horrible thing that he did control my choices and control my happiness. And I was so depressed for such a long time. And I always boiled it back down to like that horrible person because I hadn't forgiven him. And I don't know if I would say I've 100% forgiven him, but I've at least like breached the subject of like, you can't let this control your life for the rest of your life, because you will have a horrible life. And that was the goal of this horrible situation, was to mess up a bunch of people's lives. And if I continue to let my life be messed up, then he wins. So it was a really, it was a weird thing that I did, but it was interesting. It was kind of a cool experience to be like, oh, there's less of a charge here than I thought there would be. I don't feel as like, it doesn't feel as brutal as I thought it was gonna.
Yeah,
that means I'd grown
a
little bit.
Of course, yeah. While I was listening to the podcast, like it was like more like a mystery, and I was actually listening to it during my bios class.
Your teacher's probably like, what is she?
So it was like I honestly enjoyed every single minute of it because it's like made me think like I would want to binge listen to the whole show and like I need to know what happens next. Like I really need to know.
That's cool. And fortunately now all of season 1 is published, so it is bingeable as of a few days ago. So it is ready for your bingeable enjoyment.
Yeah, so we will link the podcast down below, so make sure everyone go listen to the podcast. Yeah,
It was an honor, to be honest, to interview because we were reading through the website and like before I actually contacted you, Taylor, I was like, you were saying you also like I think you commented on the group, the She Podcast group, right? Comments. So I was reading it. I was like, oh my god, a survivor of the shooting. And then I told Megha. Megha was like, yeah, sure, let's just schedule a date quickly, email her and so. And then I got a response from you, which was really good. And I was reading. We were reading the website. We were reading your website last week actually. And we were like doing the script and it was like so like our whole team was like surprised like oh my god your team won Oscars, Golden Globe. Like it was so oh my god, and we were like oh my god, I can't believe you're interviewing.
Who is this person?
exactly.
Well, it is an honor to be a part of your podcast, and it's been really interesting because I've gotten to do interviews like this, probably like 30 of them or something at this point. And I haven't gotten to do any with people who are actually in their teenage years, which is what Foreward is about. So I was like so excited when I saw your email of like, oh, wonderful. Like here's like people who are actually going to really understand the subject matter. They're going to be able to resonate with the characters and like the point they're at in their lives. And so I was really excited to get to do this with you guys today.
Yeah, same. Yeah, as Varsha said, yeah, I've also, this is very interesting talk too about, your life as a director and a production manager, the shooting survivor. Yeah, because it's something that Varsha and I, like our generation, goes through during school. So it was very interesting to learn your point of view and to learn more about this. And
well, very cool. It was really nice to meet you both.
Yeah, nice to meet you too.
So as always, thanks for listening to this episode. We hope you guys enjoyed this episode. And again, Taylor, thank you so much. And yeah, so subscribe to our YouTube channel for more fun and entertaining episodes. Special guests will be aired on YouTube and other collabs will be on other broadcasting platforms. Visit our website at meghaversion.com and email us at meghaversion2020@gmail.com if you have any media or inquiry requests. Feedback is always appreciated.
Thank you for joining.
So much again.
All right, guys, have a wonderful night.
You too.
Bye.